Mia Roberts had a system for everything in her life. Her books were organized by genre and then alphabetically by author. Her spice rack followed the frequency of use, with cinnamon and basil at eye level. Even her schedule adhered to a predictable pattern. Work at the historic Westfield Public Library from Monday to Friday. Grocery shopping on Saturday mornings and Sunday afternoons reserved for reading in the park when weather permitted. What Mia's system didn't account for was her best friend Harper, bursting into the library's break room, eyes wide with excitement and phone clutched to her chest like it contained state secrets. "I found him," Harper announced, sliding into the chair opposite Mia's modest lunch of yogurt and apple slices. Mia glanced up from her dog-eared copy of Jane Austen, her reading glasses perched on the tip of her nose. "Found who, exactly?" she asked, though she had a sinking feeling she already knew the answer. "Your future husband, obviously." Harper grinned, swiping through her phone to find something. She had made it her personal mission to end Mia's 2-year dating drought since David had left her for his personal trainer. Mia sighed, removing her glasses and placing them carefully on the table. "Harper, we've talked about this. I'm not interested in—" "Just look." Harper thrust her phone across the table. On the screen was a photo of a man with tousled dark hair and an easy smile that reached his eyes. Hazel eyes that seemed to hold a story Mia couldn't quite decipher. Despite herself, Mia felt a flutter of interest. "Who is he?" "Jake. He's the new maintenance guy at my building. Moved here from Chicago about 2 months ago. Single, 34, and absolutely charming." Harper wiggled her eyebrows suggestively. "I've already set up a date for Friday night at Rosie's Cafe, 7 o'clock. You're welcome." "You did what?" Mia nearly choked on her apple slice. "Harper, I can't just go on a date with your building's janitor. I don't know anything about him." "That's what the date is for, honey. And don't be a snob. He's a maintenance supervisor, not just a janitor. Besides, when was the last time you met someone who wasn't covered in book dust?" Mia felt heat rising to her cheeks. It wasn't about his job, it was about the ambush. "I'm not being a snob. I just prefer to know someone before I sit across a table from them for 2 hours. Which is exactly why you haven't been on a date since the Obama administration." Harper softened her tone. "Look, he's nice. Normal, probably reads books too. And he laughed at my joke about the difference between Hemingway and a fishing rod." "Which is?" "One catches fish and the other catches pretentious English majors." Harper grinned. Despite herself, Mia let out a small laugh. "That's terrible. But you laughed, and so did Jake. Just give him a chance. For me—" Harper clasped her hands together in mock prayer. Mia looked at the photo again. There was something unpretentious about his smile, the way his eyes crinkled at the corners. He looked kind, and it had been 2 years. "Fine," she relented. "But if he turns out to be a serial killer, you're paying for my headstone." "Deal," it'll read, "Here lies Mia. She finally took a chance." In the penthouse office of Montgomery Developments, Jake Montgomery stared out at the Boston skyline, the afternoon sun glinting off the glass and steel of the buildings he'd had a hand in creating. At 34, Jake had built one of the most successful real estate development companies on the East Coast, with a reputation for ruthlessness that kept competitors awake at night and journalists circling like sharks. "Mr. Montgomery, the Preservation Committee is waiting in the conference room." His assistant, Veronica, stood at the door, tablet in hand. Jake turned, straightening his custom Tom Ford tie. "How many?" "5, including Eleanor Simmons." Jake suppressed a groan. Eleanor Simmons, the 60-something firebrand who had made it her personal mission to thwart his plans to redevelop the historic Westfield district. The Dragon Lady herself, wonderful. "They have a petition with over 10,000 signatures opposing the library redevelopment." Jake's jaw tightened. The Westfield Public Library was the cornerstone of his new development plan, an outdated building sitting on prime real estate. His plan would replace it with a modern, mixed-use complex that would revitalize the entire neighborhood. 10,000 signatures won't change the fact that the city needs revenue and that building is falling apart, he said, picking up his suit jacket from the back of his chair. Let's get this over with. 30 minutes later, Jake was gripping the edge of the conference table so tightly his knuckles had turned white. That library has been the heart of Westfield for over a century, Mr. Montgomery, Eleanor Simmons was saying, her voice steady but steel-edged. It's where children discover reading, where the homeless find shelter and resources, where community happens. And you want to tear it down for luxury condos and boutique shops that nobody in the current neighborhood can afford. I want to build a modern facility that will generate tax revenue for schools, infrastructure, and yes, public services, Jake countered. The current building is inefficient, inaccessible, and costs the city hundreds of thousands in maintenance every year. Some things are worth maintaining, Mr. Montgomery, Eleanor said, her gaze unflinching. Not everything should be measured in dollars and cents. Jake felt a familiar frustration building. This was the problem with people like Eleanor. They were so caught up in nostalgia that they couldn't see the practical realities. I appreciate your passion, Ms. Simmons, but the decision will ultimately be made by the City Council next month, not by petitions or emotional appeals. Eleanor gathered her papers, her movements deliberate. Then we'll take our emotional appeals to the City Council, Mr. Montgomery. This isn't over. After the committee filed out, Jake loosened his tie and slumped in his chair. Veronica lingered at the door. Your father called again, 3 times today. Jake ran a hand through his hair. Richard Montgomery, the architect of both the family fortune and Jake's trust issues, had been calling non-stop since the announcement of the Westfield project. Tell him I'm still in meetings. He said, and I quote, tell that stubborn son of mine that bulldozing libraries is exactly the kind of PR nightmare I warned him about. Jake couldn't help the bitter laugh that escaped him. Rich, coming from a man who once demolished an orphanage to build a parking structure. Also, don't forget you have that charity gala on Saturday. Black tie. You're presenting the check for the children's hospital wing. Jake nodded, already dreading the evening of fake smiles and even faker people, all trying to get close to his wallet while pretending to care about whatever cause was being supported that night. And one more thing, Veronica added, almost as an afterthought. The plumber can't make it to your condo tonight to fix that leak. He's backed up until Monday. Jake frowned. The persistent drip in his bathroom had been driving him insane for days. Fine, I'll handle it myself. Veronica raised an eyebrow. You're going to fix your own plumbing? I grew up on a construction site, Veronica. I can handle a leaky faucet. His father might have been a ruthless businessman, but he had also believed that his son should know how things worked from the ground up. Jake had spent summers hauling materials and learning trades long before he ever set foot in a boardroom. 3 hours later, Jake was on his hands and knees under his bathroom sink, dress shirt sleeves rolled up, and an array of tools spread out on the Italian marble floor. The leak, it turned out, was more complicated than he had anticipated. His phone buzzed with a text from his friend Alex. Still on for basketball tomorrow. Some of the guys from my building are joining. Regular guys, not corporate drones. Jake smiled. Alex was the only person from college who still treated him like a normal human being and not a wallet with legs. Ever since Jake's company had taken off, genuine connections had become rare. Women dated his bank account. Men befriended his influence, and everyone wanted something, which was why, 2 months ago, when he'd helped Alex move into his new apartment building and been mistaken for a maintenance worker by the building manager, Jake hadn't corrected the assumption. For one afternoon, he'd been just Jake, carrying furniture, fixing a loose cabinet door, being thanked for his help rather than his checkbook. He'd impulsively accepted the building manager's offer of part-time maintenance work, creating an alternate identity as Jake Wilson, a recent Chicago transplant, looking to make some extra cash while he figured things out. He'd even shown up for a few weekends, fixing things around the building and enjoying the simple satisfaction of solving tangible problems instead of navigating corporate politics. It was ridiculous, of course. a billionaire moonlighting as a handyman for minimum wage. But it was also the most authentic human interaction he'd had in years. His phone buzzed again. "Also, my neighbor Harper wants to set you up with her friend. Librarian, cute, Friday at Rosie's. You in?" Jake hesitated. A date with someone who had no idea who he was? Someone who might like him for him, not for what he could give them? The idea was tempting, but he also knew it was dishonest and complicated and probably a terrible idea. He typed his reply, "I'll be there." A day, Friday evening, arrived with a flutter of nerves that Mia hadn't experienced since her first job interview. She'd changed outfits 4 times before settling on a casual blue dress that Harper had once described as bringing out the sparkle in her eyes, and a pair of comfortable ankle boots. Rosie's cafe was busy but not crowded, with soft lighting and the smell of freshly ground coffee creating an atmosphere that calmed her jittery nerves. Mia arrived 10 minutes early, punctuality being another of her systems, and secured a table by the window. At exactly 7 o'clock, the door opened, and in walked the man from Harper's photo. In person, Jake was taller than she'd expected, with broad shoulders under a simple grey Henley and dark jeans. His hair was slightly damp, as if he'd just showered, and there was a small cut on his right hand. Occupational hazard, she presumed. Their eyes met across the room and he smiled, that same genuine smile from the photo, and Mia felt something shift inside her, a possibility. "Mia?" he asked, approaching her table. She nodded, returning his smile. "Jake, that's me." He extended his hand, and she noticed calluses on his palm as they shook. Working hands, honest hands. "Harper's told me a lot about you." "All terrifying, I'm sure." Mia laughed nervously. Jake pulled out the chair opposite her. "Actually, she said you're the smartest person she knows, and that you can find the perfect book for anyone after talking to them for 5 minutes. Mia felt her cheeks warm. That's actually really nice of her. Usually, she just tells people I'm pathologically organized and dangerously obsessed with fictional characters. Jake laughed, a warm sound that seemed to fill the space between them. "That doesn't sound so bad. I'd take fictional characters over real people most days." "A man after my own heart," Mia said, then immediately felt her blush deepen at the implication. But Jake just smiled, picking up the menu. "So, what does a librarian recommend from Rosie's menu? I'm new to the neighborhood." As they ordered and began to talk, Mia was surprised by how easily the conversation flowed. Jake asked thoughtful questions about her work at the library, seeming genuinely interested in the programs she ran for local children and her passion for preserving access to literature for everyone. "So, the library's pretty important to the community?" he asked, something flickering in his expression that Mia couldn't quite identify. "It's essential," she said firmly. "For a lot of people, it's the only place they can access computers, the internet, job resources. For kids, it's a safe space after school. For seniors, it's social connection." She paused, realizing she was getting on her soapbox. "Sorry, I get a bit passionate about it." "Don't apologize," Jake said quickly. "It's refreshing to hear someone care so much about something." "Even if it's just an old building full of outdated books?" she asked, echoing the criticism she'd heard from the city manager at the last budget meeting. A shadow crossed Jake's face. "Buildings have stories too," he said quietly. "Sometimes we're too quick to tear down the old to make way for the new." Mia tilted her head, studying him with new interest. "That's not what I expected a maintenance guy to say." Jake seemed to tense slightly. "What did you expect?" "I don't know. Maybe something about how old buildings are money pits and a nightmare to maintain." He relaxed, laughing. "Well, that too. But there's value in preservation, in respecting what came before." Mia felt a connection deepening between them, something unexpected and intriguing. This man fixed things for a living, and yet he seemed to understand the value of history, of stories, in a way that surprised her. Their conversation wandered from books to movies to childhood memories. Jake told her about growing up in Boston with a demanding father who expected perfection, while Mia shared stories of her small-town upbringing with parents who had encouraged her love of reading, but never quite understood her desire to move to the city. "So, Chicago to Boston is quite a change," Mia said, as they shared a slice of Rosie's famous chocolate cake. "What prompted the move?" Jake hesitated, his fork pausing midway to his mouth. "I needed a fresh start," he said finally. "In Chicago, I was defined by certain expectations. Here, I can just be me." "And who is that?" Mia asked softly. "The real Jake?" Their eyes met across the table, and for a moment something vulnerable flickered in his gaze. "I'm still figuring that out," he admitted. "But tonight has been a good reminder of who I'd like to be." When the check came, they both reached for it simultaneously, their hands brushing. A jolt of electricity seemed to pass between them, and Mia pulled back, flustered. "My treat," Jake insisted. "We could split it," Mia countered, not wanting to fall into outdated gender roles on principle. Jake smiled. "How about this? You let me get this one, and next time it's on you." Next time. The implication hung in the air between them, a question and an offer wrapped in two simple words. "Deal," Mia said, surprising herself with how much she wanted there to be a next time. As they left the cafe, the evening air had cooled, and Mia shivered slightly. Without hesitation, Jake shrugged out of his jacket and draped it over her shoulders. "Such a gentleman," she teased, though she was touched by the gesture. "Don't tell anyone," he said with a wink. "I have a reputation to maintain." They walked slowly toward her apartment, neither seeming eager to end the evening. When they reached her building, they paused, that familiar first-date awkwardness suddenly descending. "I had a really nice time," Mia said, meaning it more than she had expected to. "So did I," Jake replied, his eyes warm in the glow of the street lamp. "Much better than I've had in longer than I can remember." He took a step closer, and Mia felt her heart rate quicken. For a moment she thought he might kiss her, and she was surprised to realize how much she wanted him to. Instead, he took her hand gently, his thumb brushing over her knuckles in a gesture that felt somehow more intimate than a kiss would have been. "Good night, Mia," he said softly. "I hope I see you again soon." As she watched him walk away, his jacket still around her shoulders, Mia felt something she hadn't experienced in years. The beginning of a story she didn't know the ending to, a disruption to her carefully ordered system that for once she welcomed completely. What she didn't see was Jake rounding the corner, pulling out a second phone, his real phone, and finding 17 missed calls from his executive team and a text from Veronica that simply read, "We have a problem. The Preservation Committee found a historical designation loophole for the library. Call me immediately." Jake looked back toward Mia's building, the weight of his deception suddenly heavy on his shoulders. The woman who had just made him feel more alive than he had in years worked in the very building he was planning to demolish. And she had no idea who he really was. Jake Montgomery's corner office was silent, except for the rhythmic tapping of his Mont Blanc pen against the mahogany desk. Before him lay the architectural plans for the Westfield development, his vision for transforming 6 city blocks of aging buildings into a modern urban paradise. And at the center of it all, where the library currently stood, was the crown jewel, a 40-story luxury residential tower with spectacular views of the Boston skyline. "You look like hell," Veronica observed, placing a steaming cup of black coffee on his desk. "Late night?" Jake ran a hand over his face, feeling the stubble he hadn't bothered to shave. He'd been up until 3 in the morning reviewing the legal documents after the Preservation Committee's latest maneuver. You could say that. He took a sip of the coffee, not bothering to mention that part of his exhaustion stemmed from lying awake, thinking about a librarian with intelligent blue eyes and a passion for old buildings, the very buildings he was planning to replace. "The legal team found something," Veronica said, sliding a folder across his desk. "The historical designation claim isn't as solid as the committee thinks." The library was renovated in 1978, which compromised some of its original architectural integrity. Jake flipped through the documents, his developer's mind automatically calculating the angles, while another part of him, a part he wasn't entirely comfortable acknowledging, remembered Mia's animated expression as she'd talked about the summer reading program she had organized for underprivileged kids. "We could challenge the designation in court," he murmured. "Exactly. Bradley and legal says we'd have a 70% chance of winning, but it would be a PR nightmare." Jake finished her thought. David versus Goliath. Big bad developer crushes beloved community library. Veronica nodded, especially after that Boston Globe piece last month. The Demolition Man wasn't exactly a flattering portrait. Jake winced at the reminder of the newspaper article that had painted him as a soulless corporate shark, comparing him to his father, but without the occasional charitable impulse to soften his image. "What if we modified the plans?" he suggested, surprising both Veronica and himself. "Keep the library but modernize it, incorporate it into the development somehow." Veronica's perfectly shaped eyebrows rose. "That would cut into the profit margin significantly. The board won't like it. I control 51% of the company. The board will get over it." "May I ask what's brought on this sudden interest in preservation? Last week you called that library a mausoleum for dead trees." Jake's mind flashed to Mia again, the way she'd leaned forward, eyes bright, as she'd described an elderly man who came to the library every day to read the newspaper because he couldn't afford a subscription at home. "Just exploring all options," he said neutrally. "Have the architects draft some alternatives that integrate the existing structure." Veronica studied him with suspicious eyes, but nodded. "I'll set it up. Also, your father called again. He's gravely concerned about the direction of the Westfield project and insists on a meeting." "He can keep insisting. I've been running this company for 6 years without his input, and I'm not about to start taking it now." "He mentioned something about calling in his markers with the zoning board," Veronica added carefully. Jake's jaw tightened. Richard Montgomery still had connections throughout the city, friendships built on favors and veiled threats over decades of development deals. If he decided to interfere, fine. Schedule lunch next week, somewhere public where he'll have to behave. "Already done. Tuesday at 1, the Bristol." Jake shook his head, not for the first time wondering if Veronica had some form of precognition. "What would I do without you?" "Crash and burn spectacularly," she replied without missing a beat. "Now, about the charity gala tonight," Jake groaned. He'd completely forgotten about the black tie event where Montgomery Developments would be presenting a $1 million check to the Children's Hospital. An evening of fake smiles, insincere flattery, and at least 3 women his mother would subtly push in his direction as potential daughter-in-law material. "You have to go," Veronica said firmly, reading his expression. "The mayor will be there, along with half the city council, the same people who will be voting on your zoning requests next month." I know, Jake sighed. "What time?" 7. "Car will pick you up at 6:30. As Veronica turned to leave, Jake found himself asking, "What do you know about the Westfield Library, as a regular person, not as my assistant?" She paused, looking thoughtful. "I took my nephew there for story time last month. The building has seen better days, but the children's librarian, woman named Mia, I think, she was amazing, had 20 squirming kids completely captivated for an hour. My nephew talks about her like she's some kind of superhero." Jake felt his heart skip at the mention of Mia's name. "And the library itself? Would you miss it if it was gone?" "Honestly, yes. It's not just books. They have community programs, classes for immigrants learning English, job search assistance." She studied him with sudden insight. "Why the interest, boss? Having a crisis of conscience?" Jake waved her off. "Just market research. Go terrify some contractors or whatever it is you do when you're not here." Daddy saw. After she left, Jake swiveled his chair to face the floor-to-ceiling windows. In the distance, he could just make out the distinctive copper dome of the Westfield Library, its patina green against the blue sky. For the first time in his career, he found himself questioning the reflexive impulse to demolish and rebuild, to erase and replace. And it had nothing to do with profit margins or PR concerns. It had everything to do with the way Mia Roberts' eyes had lit up when she talked about that building. His phone buzzed with a text from an unfamiliar number. "This is Mia, from last night. Harper gave me your number. I still have your jacket. Coffee tomorrow." Jake stared at the message, a war of conscience raging within him. The right thing would be to tell her the truth now, before things went any further, to admit that he wasn't just Jake the maintenance guy, but Jake Montgomery, the developer with plans to demolish her beloved workplace. Instead, he typed, "I'd love to. Say 10 a.m. at Rosie's again, and keep the jacket. It looks better on you anyway." He pressed send, then immediately opened his calendar and blocked off the entire morning. The billionaire CEO would be mysteriously unavailable, while Jake the maintenance man would be getting coffee with the woman he couldn't stop thinking about. Mia hummed to herself as she shelved books in the classic literature section, a smile playing at her lips. After texting Jake about coffee tomorrow, she'd felt a rush of boldness that was entirely out of character. Harper would be proud. "Someone's in a good mood," observed Mrs. Chen, the head librarian, as she passed by with a cart of returns. "Did we get approved for the summer program budget?" "Not yet," Mia replied, aligning a copy of Pride and Prejudice precisely with the other books on the shelf. "Just had a nice evening." Mrs. Chen's eyes twinkled knowingly. "Would this nice evening involve the reason you've been checking your phone every 3 minutes? Mia felt her cheeks warm. "Possibly." "Well, good for you. It's about time you—" Mrs. Chen stopped abruptly, her expression shifting from warm amusement to something more guarded. Mia turned to follow her gaze and found Eleanor Simmons approaching, clutching a folder to her chest with determined energy. The 68-year-old community activist was a library regular and one of its fiercest defenders in the face of budget cuts and, more recently, the looming threat of redevelopment. "Ladies," Eleanor greeted them, her silver bob swinging as she nodded. "I come bearing both news and battle plans." Mrs. Chen glanced around at the quiet library. "Perhaps we should take this to my office." Once the door was closed, Eleanor spread several documents across Mrs. Chen's desk. "The Montgomery development proposal goes before the City Council in 4 weeks. We need to mobilize the community before then." Mia leaned forward, examining what appeared to be architectural renderings of a gleaming skyscraper where the library currently stood. "Is this their plan? To just erase us?" "That's exactly their plan," Eleanor confirmed grimly. "Replace this 100-year-old community resource with luxury condos starting at $2 million. "But what about the historical designation application?" Mrs. Chen asked. "It's our best hope, but Montgomery's legal team is fighting it. They're arguing that the 1970s renovation disqualifies us." Eleanor's lined face was set with determination. "We need to show the council this isn't just about a building. It's about the community that depends on it." Mia thought about the daily visitors. The elderly man who read the newspaper every morning, the middle school students who came for homework help, the young mother who brought her toddler to story time while she took online courses on the library computers. "What can we do?" she asked. Eleanor smiled. "That's where you come in, dear. We need stories. Human impact. Who better to collect them than the librarian everyone talks to? I want testimonials, photographs, anything that shows what this place means to real people." Mia nodded, her earlier happiness now tempered by purpose. "I can do that. We're also planning a community rally next Saturday. I've already contacted the local news stations." Mrs. Chen looked concerned. "We have to be careful. The library receives city funding. We can't be seen as political. Which is why we need faces that aren't on the city payroll as our public spokespersons," Eleanor replied, turning to Mia. Would you consider speaking at the rally? Technically, you're a part-time employee, not management. Mia hesitated. Public speaking wasn't her forte, and the idea of standing before news cameras made her stomach clench. But the alternative, watching silently as the place she loved was destroyed, was worse. "I'll do it," she said with more confidence than she felt. "Someone has to stand up to Montgomery and his bulldozers." Eleanor squeezed her hand. "That's the spirit. These developers think they can just waltz in with their millions and reshape our community without our input. It's time Jake Montgomery learned that some things aren't for sale." Mia's phone buzzed with Jake's reply about coffee tomorrow, and she felt a small thrill despite the serious conversation. Two parts of her life, the beginning of something new and the fight to preserve something precious, were unfolding simultaneously. Little did she know how directly they would collide. The charity gala was everything Jake had dreaded, a sea of designer gowns and tuxedos, air kisses, and calculated laughter, all under the guise of philanthropy. He moved through the crowd in his Tom Ford tuxedo, shaking hands with city officials and accepting congratulations for Montgomery Development's generous donation to the Children's Hospital. "Jake, darling." His mother, Vivian Montgomery, elegant in midnight blue Chanel, appeared at his elbow. "There you are. I've been looking everywhere. Have you met Councillor Hawkins' daughter? She just finished her MBA at Harvard." Jake suppressed a sigh. His mother's attempts at matchmaking had become more determined since his 34th birthday. In her mind, the Montgomery legacy required not just financial success, but the right kind of wife and, eventually, heirs. "Mother, I'm trying to close a deal with the mayor tonight, not find a date." Vivian patted his cheek in a gesture that somehow managed to be both affectionate and condescending. "Multitask, darling. It's what Montgomerys do best. Besides, a suitable partner would only enhance your image. That dreadful newspaper article called you Boston's most eligible and most ruthless bachelor. Not exactly the reputation we want for the family, is it?" Before Jake could respond, he spotted his father entering the ballroom, commanding attention without effort. At 65, Richard Montgomery still possessed the presence that had intimidated developers, politicians, and his own son for decades. "Your father's here," Vivian observed, following his gaze. "He mentioned he wants to discuss the Westfield project with you. Something about wasting an opportunity?" "I'm handling it," Jake replied tersely, "and I don't need his input. He built that company from nothing, Jake. His experience is valuable." "His experience is outdated. The world has changed since he was buying up property in the 70s. His mother gave him a knowing look. "The fundamentals of business never change, darling. Your father understood that you have to be ruthless to succeed. And look where that got him. 3 divorces and a son who didn't speak to him for 5 years. Vivian winced. "That's not fair, Jake. He did what he thought was best. For the business, never for his family." Jake drained his champagne. "Excuse me, I see the mayor trying to get my attention." He escaped into the crowd, circulating as expected, making small talk about tax incentives and urban renewal with people whose support he needed. But his mind kept drifting to simpler conversations about favorite books and childhood memories, to blue eyes that looked at him without calculation or agenda. Two worlds, entirely separate. Jake, the ruthless developer, and Jake, the maintenance man. One was who he had become. The other was who he sometimes wished he could be. His phone vibrated in his pocket. His real phone, not the burner he used for his alternate identity. A text from Veronica. "Preservation Committee planning protest rally. Next Saturday noon at the library. Media will be there." Jake frowned. Public opposition was growing faster than anticipated. A negative news cycle could sway the city council, regardless of the legal merits of his proposal. He needed to get ahead of this. As if conjured by his thoughts, his father appeared beside him. "Son," Richard Montgomery acknowledged with a nod, "your mother says you've been avoiding my calls." "I've been busy," Jake replied, not bothering to deny it. "The Westfield project is at a critical stage," So I hear. Also hear you're letting a bunch of sentimental book lovers derail $100 million development. His father's tone was conversational, but Jake recognized the criticism underneath. I'm considering alternatives that might generate less opposition. Richard raised an eyebrow. Since when does Jake Montgomery care about opposition? You didn't earn the nickname the Demolition Man by compromising. Maybe I don't want that nickname. The words escaped before Jake could stop them. His father studied him with shrewd eyes. What's really going on, Jake? This isn't like you. You've never hesitated to clear the board when necessary. For a wild moment, Jake considered telling his father everything, about his double life, about Mia, about the doubts he'd begun to have. But decades of emotional distance couldn't be bridged in one conversation. I'm exploring all angles, he said instead. Sometimes preservation can be incorporated profitably into new development. Richard snorted. You're going soft. That library is a money pit sitting on $20 million worth of real estate. The smart play is to bulldoze it and start fresh. Like you did with the Harborview orphanage? Jake couldn't resist the jab. His father's expression hardened. That was 30 years ago, and that orphanage was a crumbling fire trap. The parking structure I built provides revenue that funds 3 children's homes now. Sometimes you have to make hard decisions for the greater good. Is that what you tell yourself? It's the truth. I never apologize for creating value, and neither should you. Richard straightened his already perfect bow tie. The minute you start second-guessing business decisions based on sentimentality is the minute you start failing. Jake felt the familiar frustration rising. This was why their conversations inevitably turned into arguments. His father's absolute certainty versus Jake's growing doubts about the Montgomery way of doing business. Times change, Dad. Development doesn't have to mean destruction. More spoken like someone who hasn't had to fight for everything he has, Richard replied, his voice taking on the edge that had intimidated boardrooms for decades. I built the foundation you're standing on, Jake. Don't forget that. As his father walked away to charm the mayor's wife, Jake felt the weight of legacy and expectation pressing down on him. Richard Montgomery had created an empire through sheer force of will and a willingness to bulldoze anything or anyone in his path. Jake had followed that blueprint to success, earning billions and a reputation as formidable as his father's. But standing in that glittering ballroom, surrounded by wealth and influence, Jake found himself longing for the simple pleasure of tomorrow's coffee date with a woman who knew nothing of Montgomery developments or the Demolition Man. A woman who saw him only as Jake, the maintenance guy with calloused hands and genuine smiles. The problem was that Jake didn't really exist. Saturday morning dawned clear and cool, a perfect early autumn day in Boston. Mia spent more time than she would admit selecting her outfit, settling on jeans, a soft green sweater that brought out flecks of green in her blue eyes, and her favorite leather jacket. Her hair, usually confined to a practical ponytail at work, fell in loose waves around her shoulders. It's just coffee, she told her reflection, trying to calm the butterflies in her stomach, with a nice, normal guy who fixes things and has great eyes and actually listens when you talk. The flutter in her chest suggested it might be more than just coffee, but Mia refused to get ahead of herself. 2 years of singlehood had taught her to proceed with caution. Men who seemed wonderful at first often revealed their true colors later, like David, who had begun their relationship with poetry and ended it by telling her she was too predictable for someone climbing the corporate ladder. Rosie's was busy with the Saturday morning crowd when Mia arrived, precisely at 10. She scanned the room but didn't see Jake yet. Finding a small table in the corner, she ordered a latte and tried not to check the door every 30 seconds. At 10:11, not that she was counting, the bell above the door jingled, and Jake walked in. Her heart did a little somersault at the sight of him in jeans and a navy button-down shirt, sleeves rolled up to reveal strong forearms. His hair was slightly tousled, as if he'd run his hands through it on the way over, and he looked somewhat tired, but his face brightened the moment he spotted her. "Sorry I'm late," he said, sliding into the chair opposite her. "Building emergency. Water heater issue in apartment 4B. On a Saturday?" "That's dedication," Mia said, trying to ignore the pleasant warmth that spread through her at his presence. Jake's smile faltered, almost imperceptibly. "Well, when things break, they don't check the calendar first." A waitress appeared and Jake ordered black coffee, the stronger the better, and they both chose blueberry muffins. "Rough morning?" Mia asked, noting the shadows under his eyes. "Rough week," he admitted. "Some work complications, nothing for you to worry about." "I'm a good listener," she offered, "if you want to talk about it." Jake hesitated, seeming to weigh his words carefully. "It's just, sometimes I find myself caught between what's expected of me professionally and what feels right personally. Ever feel that way?" Mia thought about the rally she'd agreed to speak at, the public stance she was preparing to take against a powerful developer. "Actually, yes. I'm dealing with something similar at the library." "What's happening at the library?" Jake asked, his tone suddenly more alert. "There's this development company, Montgomery Developments, that wants to tear it down and build luxury condos," Mia explained, not noticing how Jake's posture had stiffened. "We're fighting it, but it's David versus Goliath, you know. This billionaire developer against community volunteers and a couple of underpaid librarians." Jake swallowed, his knuckles whitening around his coffee cup. "And what do you think should happen?" "The library should be preserved, obviously," Mia said passionately. "It's not just a building. It's the heart of that neighborhood. People depend on it. But guys like Jake Montgomery don't see that. They only see dollar signs and development opportunities." "You say his name like you know him," Jake observed carefully. Mia shook her head. "I've never met him, thank goodness, but I've read about him. They call him the Demolition Man in the press. Can you imagine being proud of a nickname like that? Of being known for destroying things?" Jake looked down at his coffee, his expression unreadable. "Maybe there's more to the story. Development creates jobs, housing, tax revenue for the city. At what cost?" Mia countered. "Pushing out existing communities, erasing history, making neighborhoods unaffordable for the people who already live there." She stopped herself, realizing her voice had risen. "Sorry, I get worked up about this. It's just, this library matters to me." Jake was quiet for a moment before asking, "So what are you going to do?" "We're organizing a community rally next Saturday. I've even agreed to speak at it, which is terrifying." Mia laughed nervously. "Public speaking is not exactly in my comfort zone, but someone has to stand up to Montgomery and his bulldozers." The irony of the situation was not lost on Jake, sitting across from a woman passionately opposing his business while she had no idea who he really was. He should end this now before it went any further, before anyone got hurt. Instead, he heard himself asking, "Maybe I could help you practice your speech, if you want." Mia's expression brightened. "Really? You'd do that?" "Of course. I'm pretty handy with a hammer, but I'm also a decent listener." Jake tried for a smile that he hoped didn't look as pained as it felt. "That would be amazing. Thank you." Her genuine gratitude made his chest tighten with guilt. "Although fair warning, it's going to include some pretty harsh words about heartless developers." "I can handle it," Jake said, wondering if that was true. "We all have to stand up for what we believe in, right?" Their conversation drifted to lighter topics. Favorite movies. He loved classics. She preferred indie films. Dream travel destinations. He'd been everywhere for business but rarely had time to explore. While she had a carefully annotated travel journal of places she hoped to visit someday, and childhood memories, he edited his significantly, transforming his privileged upbringing into something more ordinary. The more they talked, the more Jake felt himself relaxing into this alternate version of himself, one unburdened by the Montgomery name and all it entailed. With Mia, he could just be himself, or at least parts of himself that had been buried under years of boardrooms and balance sheets. When Mia excused herself to use the restroom, Jake checked his real phone and found 17 missed calls and a text from Veronica that simply read, Emergency. Library protesters found historical documentation that might actually block us. Call immediately. He was living on borrowed time in this charade. Reality was closing in from all sides. When Mia returned, she suggested they take advantage of the beautiful day with a walk along the Charles River. Jake knew he should decline, make up an excuse, end this before it went any further. Instead, he found himself standing, offering his hand and saying, "Lead the way." The September sunshine bathed the riverbank in golden light as they strolled, talking easily about everything and nothing. They paused to watch a group of college students practicing rowing, their oars moving in perfect synchronization across the water's glimmering surface. "I always wondered what that would be like," Mia mused, "being part of a team like that, everyone moving as one." "Overrated," Jake replied without thinking. "Sometimes it just means you're trapped, moving in the same direction as everyone else, even when you want to go another way." Mia looked at him curiously. "That sounds like it comes from experience." Jake realized he'd slipped, revealing thoughts more suited to the CEO than the maintenance man. "Just something I've observed," he said quickly. They continued walking, eventually finding a bench overlooking the water. In comfortable silence, they watched the play of sunlight on the river's surface. Without conscious thought, Jake's hand found Mia's between them, their fingers intertwining naturally. "This is nice," Mia said softly, not looking at him but gently squeezing his hand. "I wasn't expecting this when Harper set us up." "What were you expecting?" An awkward hour of stilted conversation before making an excuse about early morning plans, she admitted with a laugh. "Not this. This? This feeling like I've known you longer than a day, like I can just be myself with you." The irony of her words wasn't lost on Jake, whose entire interaction with her was built on a foundation of lies. But the connection between them, that felt real, more real than anything in his carefully constructed world of power and influence. "I feel the same way," he said, and at least that much was true. Mia turned to face him, her blue eyes searching his. "Is that why you look at me like that sometimes? Like you're seeing someone you've been missing?" Jake felt exposed, as if she could somehow see through his facade to the truth underneath. "How do I look at you? Like you're surprised by me. Like you're not sure what to do with what you're feeling." She was more perceptive than he'd given her credit for. "Maybe I am surprised. Maybe I wasn't expecting you either." The air between them seemed to shift, charged with possibility. Jake leaned closer, drawn by an impulse stronger than his better judgment. Mia met him halfway, her lips soft against his, the kiss gentle at first, then deepening with a warmth that sent a current through his entire body. When they finally pulled apart, her cheeks were flushed, her eyes bright. Jake felt dizzy with the competing emotions churning inside him, desire, connection, and the crushing weight of deception. "I should tell you something," he began, the words catching in his throat. This was his chance to come clean, to tell her everything before they went any further. Mia waited, her expression open and trusting. But the truth would end this moment, this connection that felt more genuine than anything in his carefully constructed world. He couldn't bring himself to break the spell. "Not yet. I'm really glad Harper set us up," he said instead, hating himself for the cowardice. Mia's smile was worth the self-loathing. "Me too." As they walked back toward the cafe where they'd left their cars, hands still intertwined, Jake felt the two separate lives he was living, pulling him in opposite directions. Sooner or later they would collide catastrophically. But for now, with Mia's hand in his and the autumn sun warm on their backs, he allowed himself to pretend that this simpler version of himself could somehow be real. What he didn't know was that the collision would come sooner than he expected, and from a direction he never anticipated. Jake sat in his penthouse office late Sunday night, surrounded by blueprints of the Westfield development. The newly discovered historical documentation that the Preservation Committee had unearthed was legitimate. The library had briefly housed a collection of Revolutionary War correspondence in the 1920s, giving it additional historical significance. His phone rang. Veronica, despite the late hour. "They've scheduled an emergency hearing," she reported without preamble. "Wednesday morning. The Historical Commission wants to fast-track the landmark designation before our next City Council presentation." Jake ran a hand through his disheveled hair. "Who's leading the presentation for the preservation side?" "Eleanor Simmons, of course, and—" Veronica paused. "A librarian named Mia Roberts. Apparently she's becoming the public face of their campaign." Jake's stomach dropped. Mia Roberts. Yes, young, articulate, passionate about the library. The media loves her. She did an interview with the local news yesterday about the community programs the library runs. Jake opened his laptop and found the interview online. There was Mia, looking professional in a blue blouse, speaking with quiet conviction about why the library mattered. His Mia, except she wasn't his at all. And when she discovered who he really was... "Boss, are you still there?" "I'm here," Jake said, closing the video. "Prepare our best alternative proposal, the one that preserves the library facade and converts the interior to a modern community space. That cuts our profit margin by 30%. "Just do it," he snapped, then softened his tone. "Please, I need options on Wednesday." After hanging up, Jake stared at his phone for a long time before opening his messages. Mia had texted earlier. "Thanks for today. Working on my speech tomorrow night if your offer to help still stands." He should end this now. The right thing would be to tell her everything before Wednesday's hearing. Instead, he typed, "Absolutely. Your place? I'll bring dinner." Monday evening, Jake stood outside Mia's apartment door, heart pounding as if he were a teenager on his first date, instead of a billionaire CEO who regularly negotiated 9-figure deals without breaking a sweat. He balanced a bag of Thai takeout in one hand and knocked with the other. Mia opened the door, looking adorably frazzled, hair piled in a messy bun, wearing glasses he hadn't seen before, and a Boston University sweatshirt. "Hi! Sorry, I'm a disaster. Come in. I've been trying to write this speech, but words are hard." She took the food from him. "You're a lifesaver." Her apartment was exactly as he'd imagined. Cozy, with bookshelves lining every available wall, plants on the windowsills, and a lived-in comfort that his sterile penthouse lacked. A laptop sat open on the coffee table, surrounded by notes and library documents. "Nice place," he said, taking in the details that made it so uniquely her: framed vintage book covers, a collection of mismatched coffee mugs, a cat curled on the window seat. "It's small, but it's home," she said, bringing plates from the kitchen. "That's Oscar, by the way. He'll ignore you completely unless you're allergic, in which case he'll immediately try to sit on your face." Jake laughed, the tension in his chest easing slightly. "We'll get along fine then." They settled on the couch with their food, and Jake tried to focus on the present moment rather than the inevitable disaster looming on Wednesday. Mia showed him her draft speech, and he offered suggestions while carefully dancing around the central issue, that he was the very developer she was planning to denounce. "This part about the after-school program," he pointed out, "that's really powerful. Lead with the human impact." Mia nodded, making notes. "That's what Eleanor said too. Montgomery and his lawyers will talk numbers. We need to talk people." Jake winced internally at the mention of his name, but kept his expression neutral. "Smart strategy." "Duh, I'm so nervous about speaking in public," Mia admitted, setting her plate aside. "What if I freeze up? What if I make a fool of myself and hurt our cause?" "You won't," Jake said with certainty, reaching for her hand. "You're passionate about this. Just speak from your heart." Mia looked at him with such open trust that he felt physically ill with guilt. "Thank you for believing in me. It means a lot." The moment stretched between them, charged with unspoken feelings. Jake knew he should leave, should end this before it went any further. Instead, he found himself leaning toward her, drawn by a connection that felt more real than anything in his carefully constructed world. Their kiss deepened, hands exploring with increasing urgency. Mia pulled back briefly, eyes dark with desire. "Stay tonight." Jake hesitated, knowing he was crossing a line that couldn't be uncrossed. But the thought of walking away from her now, of never experiencing this connection again once she knew the truth on Wednesday, was unbearable. "Yes," he whispered against her lips, letting himself be led to her bedroom, where practical cotton sheets and a hand-stitched quilt awaited them. In the darkness, with Mia's body moving beneath his, Jake allowed himself to forget who he was, to be simply a man falling for a woman who saw something in him worth believing in. For these few stolen hours, the outside world with all its complications ceased to exist. Afterward, with Mia sleeping peacefully against his chest, Jake stared at the ceiling, the weight of his deception crushing him. How had he let things go this far? How could he possibly fix this without destroying both of them? Wednesday morning arrived with cruel inevitability. Jake stood in his office bathroom, adjusting his tie and rehearsing what he would say when he came face to face with Mia at the hearing. She hadn't answered his calls yesterday after he'd left her apartment with a flimsy excuse about work. Now she would learn the truth in the worst possible way. Veronica appeared in the doorway. "Car's waiting. The alternative plans are ready." The hearing room was packed when Jake arrived with his legal team. Media lined the back wall. The David versus Goliath narrative had captured public interest. He scanned the crowd and froze when he spotted Mia in the front row beside Eleanor Simmons. She hadn't seen him yet. As Jake moved toward his designated table, Mia looked up. Their eyes met across the room. Confusion crossed her face, then dawning comprehension, followed by hurt so profound it physically pained him to witness. "You're him?" she whispered, loud enough for those nearby to hear. "You're Jake Montgomery?" The room quieted as heads turned toward the unfolding drama. "Mia, I can explain," he began. "You're the one trying to destroy my library." Her voice rose, trembling with emotion. "All this time you were, what, spying on me, getting close to me to undermine our campaign?" "No, it wasn't like that." "Then what was it like?" Tears filled her eyes. "Was any of it real? Or was I just part of your strategy?" Before Jake could respond, the commissioner called the hearing to order. For the next hour, Jake sat rigidly as Eleanor presented the historical documentation, followed by Mia, whose voice gained strength as she spoke about what the library meant to the community, occasionally looking directly at Jake with eyes that had gone from hurt to something harder. When it was his turn to speak, Jake abandoned his prepared remarks. "After careful consideration, Montgomery Developments is withdrawing its original proposal," he announced, ignoring his lawyer's startled glance. "Instead, we're proposing a complete renovation of the existing library building, preserving its historical character while modernizing its facilities." Murmurs rippled through the audience. Jake continued, "Furthermore, we're establishing a $10 million endowment to ensure the library's programs can continue and expand for generations to come." The commissioner looked skeptical. "What prompted this dramatic change of position, Mr. Montgomery?" Jake's eyes found Mia's. "Let's just say I was reminded that some structures are worth preserving." After the hearing adjourned, Jake tried to approach Mia, but she quickly gathered her things and headed for the exit. He caught up with her in the hallway. "Mia, please, 5 minutes." She turned, her expression guarded. "Why? So you can lie to me some more?" "So I can explain. I never meant to hurt you." "But you did," she said simply. "You made me fall for someone who doesn't exist." "That's not true," Jake insisted. "The person you know, that's the real me. More real than the person everyone else sees." Mia shook her head. "The real you is someone who pretended to be a maintenance man to, what, amuse yourself? Get inside information on our campaign? No, I was Jake Wilson before I even met you. I was helping my friend move when the building manager mistook me for maintenance staff. For once, people treated me like a normal person, not a wallet or a business opportunity. So you decided to make up an entire fake identity. That's not normal behavior, Jake." "I know," he admitted. "It was wrong," admitted. "But then I met you, and suddenly the lie mattered because I was falling for you, and I knew you'd hate the real me. I don't even know who the real you is." Mia said, her voice breaking. "And I'm not sure you do either." With that, she walked away, leaving Jake standing alone in the hallway, surrounded by reporters eager for a comment about his surprising reversal, but seeing only the retreating figure of the woman who had somehow made him question everything he thought he wanted. For 2 weeks, Jake threw himself into work, spending 18-hour days redesigning the Westfield development around the now-preserved library. His penthouse remained empty, except when he collapsed into bed for a few restless hours. He'd tried calling Mia repeatedly, only to reach her voicemail. He'd sent flowers, which had been returned. He'd even stood outside the library for an hour, hoping to catch a glimpse of her. But Mrs. Chen had firmly informed him that Ms. Roberts is unavailable and would prefer to remain that way. "You look terrible," Veronica observed bluntly, placing a stack of contracts on his desk. "The board is waiting for an explanation about the library endowment, by the way." "No, tell them it's good PR," Jake muttered, signing the documents without reading them. "They're not idiots. They know it's about the librarian." Jake looked up sharply. "How do you know about her?" Veronica rolled her eyes. "The entire city knows. Billionaire developer falls for librarian fighting to save her workplace is literally a headline in today's Globe." Jake groaned, dropping his head into his hands. "Perfect." "For what it's worth," Veronica said, her tone softening, "I think she made you better, more human." "Well, she wants nothing to do with me now, so it doesn't matter." Veronica studied him for a moment. "You really care about her, don't you?" "I love her," Jake admitted, the words surprising him even as he said them. "And I ruined everything before it even had a chance to start." Across town, Mia sat in her apartment, surrounded by congratulatory messages from library patrons. The preservation victory had been celebrated throughout the community, but she felt hollow inside. Harper perched on the couch beside her. "So he lied about being a maintenance guy. That's bad. But he also saved the library and created a massive endowment. That's pretty good." "He lied about everything," Mia corrected. "His job, his background, why he was interested in me. The man changed his entire development plan and donated $10 million. I'm pretty sure his interest in you was genuine." Mia sighed, petting Oscar absently. "Even if it was, how could I ever trust him? His first instinct was deception." "People make mistakes," Harper said gently, "sometimes big ones. This wasn't a mistake, it was a calculated choice." "So was returning all 13 bouquets he sent," Harper pointed out. "I'm not saying forgive him instantly. I'm saying maybe hear him out. The guy's clearly miserable. Have you seen the photos of him in the business section? He looks like someone killed his puppy." Mia had seen them, and despite everything, her heart had ached at the dark circles under Jake's eyes, the haunted look on his face. The same face that had looked at her with such tenderness that night in her apartment, a night that now felt like a dream. "I don't even know who he really is," Mia said softly. "Maybe that's the point," Harper suggested. "Maybe neither does he." The following Saturday, Jake found himself standing in the dusty stacks of the Westfield Library, surveying the space with the renovation architect. They were discussing structural improvements when a familiar voice caused him to turn. Mia stood a few feet away, clutching a stack of children's books, her expression guarded. "Mr. Montgomery," she acknowledged stiffly. "I didn't realize you would be here today." The architect, sensing tension, murmured something about checking the basement and disappeared. "I wanted to see the space myself before finalizing plans," Jake explained, his heart racing at the sight of her. "How have you been?" "Fine," Mia replied, then sighed. "That's not true. I've been confused and angry and hurt. I deserve that." "Yes, you do." Her gaze was steady. "Why did you do it? The real reason." Jake considered his answer carefully. "When people found out I was Jake Montgomery, they wanted something from me. Money, connections, status. When they thought I was Jake Wilson, they just saw me. And when you looked at me, you saw someone worth caring about. I didn't want to lose that. So you lied." "So I lied," he admitted. And then it spiraled, and the longer it went on, the harder it became to tell the truth. He stepped closer. But Mia, everything between us was real. How I felt, how I feel about you is real. Mia's expression softened slightly. I don't know if I can believe that. Then let me prove it to you. Not with grand gestures or endowments, but by being honest. By showing you who I really am. All of me, not just the parts I thought you'd like. She hesitated, then asked, and who is that exactly? The ruthless developer, or the guy who helped me practice my speech against him? Both, Jake admitted. I'm both of those people. I've done things I'm not proud of, made choices based on profit margins instead of human impact. But I'm also someone who can change, who wants to change. Meeting you made me want to be better. That's a lot of pressure to put on someone you barely know. Then get to know me, he said simply. The real me. No more lies, just coffee. As ourselves this time. Mia considered him for a long moment. One coffee. That's all I'm promising. Jake's heart leaped. That's all I'm asking for. Their coffee date at Rosie's was awkward at first. Jake arrived in a casual sweater rather than his usual suit, drawing double takes from other patrons who recognized Boston's most infamous developer. So, billionaire, Mia said once they were seated, breaking the ice. That must be interesting. Jake laughed despite himself. It has its moments. Though I've found maintenance work surprisingly satisfying. A smile tugged at Mia's lips. Were you really fixing things in Alex's building? I was. My father made sure I knew how things worked before I was allowed to tear them down. Jake hesitated, then added, I've been thinking a lot about what you said, about not knowing who I really am. You were right. I've spent so long being what everyone expected that I lost track of myself somewhere along the way. Mia's expression softened. And who are you when you're not being the demolition man or the fake janitor? I'm still figuring that out, Jake admitted. But I know I'm someone who cares about you, who wants to be worthy of a second chance. They talked for hours. Really talked this time. Jake shared stories from his complicated childhood, the pressure of the Montgomery legacy, his complicated relationship with his father. Mia spoke about her parents' divorce, her passion for libraries as sanctuaries, her fear of taking risks. As afternoon faded into evening, something shifted between them. Not forgiveness exactly, but possibility. I can't just forget what happened, Mia said as they left the cafe. I wouldn't expect you to, Jake replied. Trust has to be earned. And that's what you want to do? Earn my trust? That's what I want, he confirmed. However long it takes. Mia studied him, searching for deception, but finding only sincerity. Then I guess we'll see. It wasn't a promise, but it was a beginning. Over the following weeks, they navigated this new, honest relationship with careful steps. Jake joined Mia for the library renovation committee meetings, listening more than speaking, learning about what the space meant to the community. Mia attended a Montgomery Developments Board meeting, watching as Jake presented plans that balanced profit with preservation, surprising his skeptical executives. They discovered each other's worlds. Jake introducing Mia to the view from his penthouse, Mia showing Jake her favorite hidden bookshop. They argued sometimes, especially when Jake's business instincts clashed with Mia's community priorities, but they learned to listen, to compromise. My father thinks I've lost my mind, Jake admitted one evening as they walked along the Charles, hands intertwined. He says falling for the library girl has made me soft. Have I? Mia asked, curious rather than defensive. Jake considered the question seriously. You've made me more thoughtful, more aware that every business decision affects real people with real lives. He squeezed her hand. I like who I am when I'm with you. It feels authentic. Mia stopped walking, turning to face him. I like who you are too. The real you, not the maintenance guy or the ruthless developer, just Jake. Just Jake, he repeated, smiling. I'm still getting used to him myself. Well, I happen to think he's worth getting to know, Mia said, standing on tiptoe to kiss him gently. In that moment, With autumn leaves swirling around them and the river glinting in the sunset, Jake Montgomery, billionaire developer and former fake janitor, felt truly seen for perhaps the first time in his life. And that's why I'm proud to announce the grand reopening of the Westfield Public Library, Jake declared, standing at the podium before a crowd of community members, press and city officials. Not just preserved, but enhanced for future generations. 6 months had passed since the fateful hearing. The renovated library gleamed behind him, its historic facade intact, but its interior transformed into a modern community space with updated technology, expanded reading rooms, and a new children's wing named in honor of Eleanor Simmons, who watched from the front row with grudging approval. This project represents a new direction for Montgomery developments, Jake continued. One that balances progress with preservation, profit with purpose. His eyes found Mia in the crowd, looking elegant in a blue dress that matched the library's restored stained glass windows. The pride in her expression meant more to him than all the applause that followed his speech. After the ceremony, as guests explored the renovated space, Richard Montgomery approached his son. "Quite the show," the elder Montgomery remarked. "The press is eating it up. Demolition Man becomes preservation champion. Your stock price is up 5%. "That wasn't the goal," Jake replied. "No? Then what was?" His father's gaze shifted to Mia, who was showing a group of children the new interactive learning center. "Ah, I see she's still in the picture. Her name is Mia, and yes, she is." Richard studied his son with shrewd eyes. "You've changed." "I've grown," Jake corrected. "There's a difference." "Well, whatever you call it, it seems to be working for you." Richard straightened his tie. "Your mother wants you both to come to dinner next week. She's dying to meet the woman who tamed Boston's most feared billionaire." Jake laughed. "I wouldn't let Mia hear you put it that way. She hasn't tamed me. She's challenged me to be better." To his surprise, his father's expression softened. "That's what the right partner does." He clapped Jake on the shoulder. "Don't mess it up." Later that evening, Jake and Mia escaped the public celebrations for a private dinner in his penthouse, now warmed by touches of her influence. Bookshelves filled with classics, colorful throw pillows, and fresh flowers on the once sterile countertops. "To new beginnings," Jake toasted, raising his glass of champagne. "And honest ones," Mia added with a knowing smile. They had come so far from their disastrous first encounters. The rebuilding of trust had been gradual, sometimes difficult, but ultimately stronger for having been tested. "I have something for you," Jake said, reaching into his pocket. "A library opening gift." He handed her a small velvet box, watching nervously as she opened it to reveal not a ring. They weren't quite there yet, but a delicate silver key charm on a chain. "It's beautiful," Mia said, lifting it curiously. "What does it open?" "Nothing literal," Jake explained. "It's a symbol. My grandmother gave a key like this to my grandfather when they got engaged. She told him it was the key to her heart, which only he would ever hold." He took her hand. "I'm not proposing. Not yet, but I wanted you to know that you hold the key to mine." Mia's eyes shimmered with emotion. "That might be the most romantic thing anyone has ever said to me." There's more where that came from," Jake promised, helping her fasten the necklace. "I've been reading those romance novels you keep leaving around my apartment." Mia laughed, then grew serious. "You know, when Harper first set us up, I never imagined we'd end up here." "You mean you didn't plan to fall for the billionaire, pretending to be a maintenance man who was trying to demolish your workplace?" "Shockingly, no," Mia replied with a grin. "But I'm glad I did, even with all the complications. Even with my father inviting us to dinner next week." Mia's eyes widened. "He what? Jake, you can't just spring that on me. What am I supposed to wear to dinner with the original Demolition Man?" Jake pulled her closer, smiling against her lips. "Just be yourself. It worked on this Montgomery. It'll work on that one too." As they kissed, The city lights twinkling beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows. Jake marveled at how his two separate worlds had finally merged into one authentic life, with Mia at its center. She had thought she was on a blind date with a janitor, but had ended up falling for the man behind the billionaire facade. And in doing so, she had helped him discover who he truly was. Neither the ruthless developer nor the pretend maintenance man, but someone real, someone worthy of the key to her heart. 1 year to the day after their disastrous first coffee date, Jake paced nervously across his penthouse, adjusting his tie for the 5th time. The panoramic windows reflected the twinkling lights of Boston at dusk, but his attention was focused entirely on the small velvet box in his pocket. "You'll wear a hole in that Italian marble if you keep this up," Harper commented from her perch on his sofa, sipping champagne. "Relax. She's going to say yes." "You don't know that," Jake countered. "I lied to her, tried to demolish her beloved library, and introduced her to my mother, who called her refreshingly ordinary at our first dinner. That's a lot to forgive." Harper rolled her eyes. "She forgave all that months ago. Besides, you've been practically living together since Christmas. Oscar the cat likes you better than her now. It's a done deal." Jake wasn't convinced. The past year had transformed him in ways he'd never imagined possible. Montgomery Developments had launched a new division focused on historically mindful renovation, turning once criticized developer into an unexpected champion for balanced urban growth. The press had dubbed it the Mia Effect, much to her embarrassment. But more importantly, Jake had found himself. Not the ruthless businessman his father had groomed, or the fake everyman he'd pretended to be, but a genuine person with values, vulnerabilities, and the courage to build something lasting, both in the city and in his personal life. "She's coming up," the doorman announced through the intercom. "Operation Proposal is a go." Harper jumped up, gathering her purse. "That's my cue. Remember, just speak from your heart. No rehearsed speeches." After she slipped out through the service entrance, Jake took a deep breath and made one final adjustment to the surprise he'd spent weeks preparing. When Mia walked in, she stopped short, her eyes widening at the transformation before her. The penthouse had been converted into a replica of Rosie's cafe, complete with the same small tables, vintage lighting fixtures, and even the chalkboard menu. The only difference was the view, Boston's skyline through floor-to-ceiling windows instead of a street view. "What is all this?" she asked, setting down her bag. She was still in her work clothes, a simple blue dress and cardigan that somehow made her more beautiful to Jake than any designer gown. "Happy anniversary," he said, stepping forward to kiss her. "I thought we could recreate our first date, the real one, not the one where I was lying about everything." Mia laughed, the sound still making his heart skip after all this time. "You mean the one where I ranted about evil developers destroying libraries?" "That's the one." Jake guided her to the table by the window, the exact spot they'd sat at Rosie's a year ago. "I thought it would be fitting, considering how far we've come." The evening unfolded with perfect nostalgia. The same blueberry muffins, the same coffee, though Jake had upgraded to beans from a small batch roaster that Mia had introduced him to. They reminisced about that first meeting, laughing now at the absurdity of their situation. "Do you know what I thought when I first saw you walk into Rosie's that night?" Mia asked, her fingers laced with his across the table. "That I was devilishly handsome. Besides that," she smiled, "I thought you looked kind. Despite all the lies that followed, I was right about that." Jake squeezed her hand. "I was terrified. Not just first-date nerves, but fear that you'd somehow see through me. That you'd recognize the ruthless developer beneath the maintenance guy disguise. Instead, I saw the real you before you could see it yourself," Mia mused. "The person you were meant to be, under all those expectations and defenses. You always were too perceptive for your own good," Jake said. "It's what makes you such a good librarian. You understand people's stories." "Speaking of stories," Mia said, "I have news. The literacy program we started at the library just got a state grant." We're expanding to 5 more branches across Boston." Jake beamed with genuine pride. The program had been Mia's brainchild, using the library as a hub for adult education, helping people gain reading skills and confidence. He'd volunteered as a tutor, finding unexpected fulfillment in helping others discover the joy of reading that Mia had always championed. "That's incredible. We should celebrate." "Isn't that what we're doing?" Mia gestured to their surrogate cafe. "Actually," Jake said, his heart beginning to race, "I had something else in mind for tonight." He stood and offered his hand, leading her to the balcony where a trail of rose petals and candles created a pathway to the edge overlooking the city. The night air was cool but not cold, perfect for early autumn in Boston. "Jake, what is all this?" Mia asked, though her expression suggested she had begun to guess. He took both her hands in his. "1 year ago, I was living 2 separate lives. I had everything money could buy and nothing that truly mattered. Then I met a librarian who saw through every wall I'd built, who challenged me to be authentic, and who showed me what real connection feels like." Mia's eyes glistened in the candlelight as Jake continued, "You once said you didn't know who I really was. Sometimes I think you knew me better than I knew myself. You saw possibilities in me that I couldn't see, and you had the courage to demand honesty, even when it would have been easier to accept comfortable lies." He reached into his pocket and withdrew the small velvet box, dropping to one knee before her. "Mia Roberts, I promise to be real with you every day for the rest of our lives. Will you marry me?" The box opened to reveal a vintage emerald ring, not the massive diamond his mother had insisted was appropriate for a Montgomery proposal, but a unique piece they had discovered together in an antique shop during a weekend trip to Cape Cod. Mia had admired it, but refused to let him buy it then. He'd returned secretly the next day. Tears spilled onto Mia's cheeks as she nodded. "Yes," she whispered, then louder, "Yes." Jake slipped the ring onto her finger, then stood to pull her into a kiss that felt like coming home. When they finally broke apart, Mia pressed her forehead against his. "You know this means you're stuck with me reorganizing your bookshelves for life," she teased, her voice thick with emotion. "I'm counting on it," Jake replied, "though I draw the line at alphabetizing my socks." "We'll negotiate terms," Mia promised, examining her ring in the candlelight. "I can't believe you remembered this ring." "I remember everything about you," Jake said simply. "Every conversation, every laugh, every moment you've made me a better person." From inside the penthouse, the sound of cheering erupted as the balcony doors flew open. Harper led the charge, followed by Mrs. Chen, Eleanor Simmons, Veronica, and even Jake's parents. "I told you she'd say yes," Harper exclaimed, hugging them both simultaneously. "Pay up, everyone. I called it." "You had a betting pool on my proposal?" Jake asked, though he couldn't muster any real outrage with Mia's hand still firmly in his. "Of course we did," Veronica confirmed. "Your father put 100 on her, saying she needed to think about it." Richard Montgomery shrugged unapologetically. "The Montgomery men traditionally have to work for it. Your mother turned me down twice before accepting." "That's because you proposed during a building demolition the first time," Vivian Montgomery reminded him, before turning to embrace Mia. "Welcome to the family, dear. You'll need a backbone of steel and the patience of a saint, but I think you've proven you have both." As congratulations flowed around them, Jake kept his arm firmly around Mia's waist, grounding himself in her presence. From fake janitor to honest man, from demolition to preservation, from isolation to connection, his journey had been unexpected but perfect in its way. Later that night, after their friends and family had departed and they stood alone in the penthouse-turned cafe, Jake held Mia close as they swayed to silent music, her head resting against his chest. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if Harper hadn't set us up?" Mia asked softly. "If we'd met some other way, me as the librarian, you as the developer?" "We'd have hated each other," Jake said with certainty. "Probably," Mia agreed. "You would have been the arrogant billionaire, and I would have been the stubborn book lover. Instead, I got to be the lying maintenance man, and you got to be the unsuspecting victim of my identity crisis. Mia laughed. When you put it that way, it's amazing we ended up here. Jake kissed the top of her head, breathing in the scent of her shampoo, lavender and something uniquely her. I think we would have found our way to each other eventually. Some stories are meant to be written, no matter how they start. Speaking of stories, Mia said, looking up at him with a mischievous glint in her eye, have I mentioned that the library board wants to commission a book about the renovation project? They're thinking of calling it Beauty Tames the Beast. How a librarian softened Boston's most feared billionaire. Jake groaned. Please tell me you're joking. Mostly, Mia assured him. Though Harper did suggest selling the movie rights, she thinks it has romantic comedy written all over it. As long as I get script approval, Jake muttered, and a better title. How about she thought she was on a blind date with a janitor, but he was the most feared billionaire in town? Perfect, Jake declared, dipping her dramatically before bringing her back up for a kiss. Absolutely perfect. And in that moment, surrounded by the remnants of their recreated first date with the woman who had helped him discover his true self, Jake Montgomery, once known as the Demolition Man, felt himself fully rebuilt at last.